If you love absurd humor, some adventurous chaos, and of course a sprinkle of satire about political revolutions, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Interesting Times by Terry Pratchett. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we are taking on another book in the Discworld series, the 17th total and the 5th book in the Rincewind sub-series, which means, of course, we're touching upon some of my absolute favorite elements of Discworld in terms of someone that just can't seem to get away from danger, no matter how hard they try and no matter how interested they are in self-preservation. This is a book that is going to introduce a few new elements to Discworld as we make our way outside of Ankh-Morpork. There is going to be some turbulent politics that, of course, are going to really push the narrative of this book. There's a discussion of the Aegyptian Empire, which is just vaguely meant to be an Eastern Empire, Chinese, Japanese. I think that one of the criticisms of this book is that there tends to be just a little too much stereotyping in this one, but of course we will get to that. So with that, let me give my usual synopsis of these books. As usual, I will have some spoilers because I am trying to do all of these books. That does require that I give some summary. I think that that's probably the most valuable thing that I can do for these books, especially since the things that I like about them and dislike about them, which I don't think there's anything I dislike about these books, but the things that I like tend to be the same from book to book. So I think that giving you a synopsis is the most valuable thing that I can do. With that in mind, my synopsis for this book is, at the beginning, we have two deities. We have Fate and the Lady, who engage in a cosmic game to determine the outcome of the struggle for the throne of the Aegyptian Empire on the counterweight continent in Discworld. The patrician of Ankh-Morpork receives a demand for the Great Wizard to be sent to the distant Aegyptian Empire. So Arch-Chancellor Mushroom Red Cooley of Unseen University is ordered to comply. The peculiar spelling of wizard, of course, matches the label on Rincewind's hat. As you recall, this is a big deal to Rincewind that he can have his wizard's hat, and he has also misspelt the word wizard on it. That's not uncommon, of course, throughout Ankh-Morpork, well, throughout all the Discworld. There seems to be some liberties taken with how to spell things. But since that is, of course, what is on Rincewind's hat, he is going to be chosen. So using Hex, their experimental machine, they are going to teleport Rincewind from a deserted island where he's been stranded since the events of Eric. Please go back to my Eric review to find out why exactly that is. And they promise to officially recognize him as a wizard despite his complete lack of qualifications. As you recall in the very first book, it says that if Rincewind were to die, the actual net amount of magic in the world will probably increase. That's how bad of a wizard he is. If he agrees to go on the mission, of course. The teleportation requires an equivalent exchange of mass, resulting in a live cannon being transported to the university, while Rincewind is sent to the counterweight continent. Arriving at high speed, he lands unharmed in a snowbank. Rincewind's instinctive knack for avoiding danger, of course, soon entangles him in major events. So he's going to encounter an old friend of his, Kohen the Barbarian, who is now leading the Silver Horde, which is, of course, a play on the Golden Horde of the Mongols. And as usual, he is, of course, don't forget, the Kohen the Barbarian himself is quite old, and so the Silver Horde is also a group of elderly wizards, which, again, the silver-haired silver fox is the reference there. And they are accompanied by Ronald Savaloy, who is a former teacher, and Cohen plans to seize the throne of the Aegyptian Empire for a comfortable retirement. Meanwhile, Rincewind learns of the original emperor, who supposedly conquered the land with the help of a great wizard and a red army. And of course, in this case, you can see how these are references to China, red being not just it's usually associated, of course, with communism, but actually long before that, red was a lucky color in China. And of course, a new red army is going to be composed of idealistic young people spreading innocuous slogans. That is a reference, of course, to communism. And it is going to be inspired by a revolutionary text that turns out to be a travelogue written by Twoflower, as you recall, an old friend and former companion of Rincewind. And of course, again, a commentary on the things that inspire revolutionary acts. Rincewind is going to free his friend Two Flower from a dungeon and discover that his two daughters are the ones leading the Red Army. And then the Grand Vizier, Lord Hong, has orchestrated a plot to frame what is essentially the harmless Red Army as a threat to justify violent suppression and to blame foreigners for the empire's unrest. Secretly enamored with Ankh-Morpork culture, Hong aims to conquer it after consolidating power. When Hong murders the emperor, intending of course to blame the Red Army, the Silver Horde uses the opportunity to infiltrate the palace. While Cohen prefers direct rule by impersonating the emperor, Hong rallies rival lords to unite their armies against the Horde, frustrating Savoy's attempt to civilize his barbarian comrades. This is one of the great points of humor, is all this discussion of what civilization means, what it means to be civilized, and there are lots of great moments in the book that outline that. Of course, before the impending battle, Rincewind spreads rumors that the Silver Horde is backed by an army of invisible vampire ghosts, exploiting some of the local superstitions and then of course just trying to find a way to get an edge. And the imperial authorities' endorsement of this myth is going to complicate efforts to dispel it. And so during the battle, Rincewind accidentally discovers the true Red Army, a legion of terracotta warriors controlled by enchanted armor, which he inadvertently activates. The automatons are going to obliterate the Adjetian forces, but Rincewind nearly drowns when the magical boots weigh him down. Two Flower rescues him just in time. Cohen, who is now the emperor, begins issuing proclamations to reduce the empire's oppression. He actually invites Rincewind to become the chief wizard and establish a university. Alarmingly, Rincewind, who suspects that that would be disastrous, of course turns it down. And indeed, Hong captures Rincewind and plans a public execution, but the faculty of Unseen University are then going to teleport Rincewind away at the very last moment. Meanwhile, Two Flower challenges Hong to a duel to avenge his wife's death, but the cannon transported earlier arrives unexpectedly, killing both Hong and Savoy. Savoy, though unsuccessful as a barbarian in life, accepts his place in the warrior's afterlife. Don't forget, of course, our favorite character, the Luggage, which had followed Rincewind to its homeland of Adjetia, is temporarily going to abandon him after forming a family with a female Luggage. But when Rincewind disappears, he then leaves his offspring to resume following his master. Ultimately, the lady, as you recall from the beginning, Lady and Fate, triumphs over fate. She manipulates the hex calculations, ensuring that Rincewind is teleported safely to the unexplored continent of XXXX, and a kangaroo from XXXX is accidentally swapped and suffers the fatal collision meant for Rincewind at Unseen University. That had been a ploy by the Unseen University. On XXXX, Rincewind meets the locals and, to true form, manages to knock himself unconscious with a boomerang. And with that, you can only guess what the next novel involving Rincewind is going to be about. But I will let you get to that. This is, just like any of the books in Discworld, a great mix of humor and parody and just a lot of great little one-liners. Let me give you some of my favorites just to, I don't know, to mention one of the things that I like, and then I'll discuss who I think this is and isn't for. So at one point there is a mention, they say, "There is a curse," they say, "May you live in interesting times." I think when times are boring, we have a tendency to underestimate just how good boring times can be. Interesting times, they may be interesting, but that also means they are probably more deadly. There's another quote discussing this idea of fate, and it says, "Most of the gods throw dice, but fate plays chess. And you don't find out until too late that he's been using two queens all along. Fate wins." You could say to the universe, "This is not fair." And the universe would say, "Oh, it isn't? Sorry." Here's some other little bits of humor dealing with our friend Rincewind. It said, "Rincewind had always relied on running away, but sometimes perhaps you had to stand and fight, if only because there was nowhere left to run." And then I do want to highlight, I think that Terry Pratchett, it's not just humorous. He does have those lines that I think are just quality bits of rhetoric. There's one when he says, "With one mighty bound you could be free, provided you realized it was one of your options." Or at another point when he says, "There was silence in the square except for the sound of several thousand people being astonished." I love those two. I think that they just reiterate that Terry Pratchett is an incredible author and not just someone that can write a good parody and have a few good quips. I think that he has just actually really quality, thoughtful lines. I think in Small Gods that really shines through, in my personal opinion. So who is this book for? Well, it is a Rincewind novel, and I'm on record saying I actually think Rincewind is a very enjoyable character. I think he is quite relatable, although I think most people don't want to admit that when it comes to high fantasy. But I think that his desire to just preserve himself, and at times his innocence really can be quite entertaining. You actually see that with all of Unseen University, despite the fact that the wizards can be quite ambitious and deadly. There's also these moments where there's a good deal of innocence that is playing into just their ignorance of the situation. And I find that also somewhat relatable with Rincewind. I found the commentary in this one about political revolutions to be really entertaining. I will say that not all of it has aged super well, in my opinion, and I certainly think that some people might not care for it, regardless of how well it did or didn't age. But I do think that if you have any familiarity with political revolutions, not just the Cultural Revolution or the Chinese Civil War, but really any major political revolutions, the French Revolution, or any of the revolutions throughout the 19th and 20th century that invoked, any kind of political ideology, those are certainly going to resonate here if you think you would find that humorous. Obviously, revolutions come with a lot of conflict, a lot of death, and so that could also be something to put people off. Who wouldn't I say this is for? Well, if you're not a fan of Discworld, I mean, this is pretty typical Discworld. If you're not a fan of Rincewind, this is pretty typical Rincewind getting pulled into a situation he didn't expect. Above all, I would say that you don't think you're going to find the debates, or if you don't think you're going to find the commentary on political revolutions to be entertaining or engaging in any way, then this probably isn't going to be for you. And then, like I said, there is a little bit of, I think, stereotyping and overgeneralizing in trying to create this society that is clearly modeled off of the Chinese. But if you know anything about Discworld, they just, he takes bits and pieces. He does not try to wholesale say that this is the Chinese society. And so there certainly could be those elements where you think, I don't think that that's exactly how I would phrase that these days. But that being said, I still think it's very humorous, and I certainly think there's much that you can get out of this book. Of course, let me know what you think about this book in general. How does it stack up to other Rincewind books? Of course, how does it stack up in the larger Discworld series? Please let me know in the comments, but don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.